And the Game Developers Conference was last week, and Google announced their new Stadia gaming platform. Some thought they may be introducing a new piece of hardware for consumers to buy to play these games, but no. What Google is doing is building out a streaming platform, and if you've got a device with a screen, that's all you need to gain access to it. They are, though, introducing something to deal with some of the lag and latency that comes across on these platforms, namely a game controller here that will connect directly to the internet and attach itself to the Google Stadia server. So when you hit a button on the controller, rather than going through your computer or tablet via Bluetooth and then out over the internet, the controller itself will be on your Wi-Fi communicating with the server. So your device that you're using as a client will just be getting all the streaming information from Google and nothing else. And as we've seen in the past, a lot of devices introduce a ton of Bluetooth latency when you're playing games with a streaming service. So this, I think, may really lend itself to an improvement in game streaming quality, although it won't be as good as a console or computer directly connected to your display. But I think for most consumers, it may be good enough. And I thought that was a very intriguing way to look at this. Now, a lot of folks in the gaming community have been very critical of this, thinking, oh, it's never going to work. But I think there's actually a very good chance this might take off a bit. John Carmack agrees. He says that I've been saying for a long time that game streaming has a significant future, not necessarily for everything, but the consumer advantages are large and we can fight the problems as developers. That's a huge endorsement from somebody who's really leading the pack on PC game development. Carmack continues to say that many people play games on TVs with so much processing lag that the pixels might as well have been coming from a data center. Not everyone knows or bothers to enable game mode, sadly. And to some degree, what he's kind of insinuating here is that with that controller directly connected to the internet, you may actually see less lag streaming than you do locally. And I think that's a very big problem, given that we've seen displays vary greatly in their own latency due to HDMI processing. So here are some things that I thought to be rather interesting about Stadia. The first is that it has a save state feature. And this might be really cool for game streamers because you could have people actually pick up the game where you are with all the same items in the game that you recovered and all the other things that you might be playing within that game and allow people to play through it just like you're playing through it. And I think that might really engage the community a bit, especially for casual players like me who don't have a lot of time to play through an 80-hour game. I could pick up somebody's save state and enjoy some of the moments of the game without having to invest as much time. There's also going to be some in-house development on this platform. So it looks like Google is making some investment into providing some exclusive software for it. And unlike other platforms where if you don't own the hardware, you can't play the game, here that's kind of irrelevant. You could maybe subscribe for a month or two and play with it. I don't know if they're going to do any kind of fixed fee games on this, but you have that option available. And I think there is far less of a barrier for people jumping in on exclusives here, given the fact that there is no hardware investment up front. And a big piece of this Stadia thing is that it really plays on Google's strengths. They know how to build server farms. They know how to scale up those servers to meet the demand that those of us on the internet require of them. So, for example, YouTube is a Google product that delivers a massive amount of data every day, and they're able to accomplish that extremely well. And this is really a very similar exercise on the hardware side for them. They don't have to sell you a game console. They don't have to market that console. They don't have to go to the FCC and get everything approved and then take the huge risk of bringing out this hardware only to see it flop. They've been through that with Android TV to some degree. They've seen how others have tried to introduce new consoles and have failed. This really speaks to Google's strengths. They are good at servers and they're good at software. And this is both of those things applied to gaming. And they're not going to have to invest anything in hardware design as a result. And that is going to keep them very much focused on the experience for gamers, which I think is what this is going to be about. Additionally, I think there's going to be a side benefit because if you want to live in the Linux ecosystem, your gaming options have been relatively limited. There are a number of games that are slowly making their way to Linux, but they haven't been performing all that well, and a lot of the big AAA titles just haven't been there. This might actually prompt some developers to beef up their Linux game, especially if Stadia gets a lot of attention here. Developers in developing for Stadia will likely be making those games run on a Linux platform, and that means that you'll be able to buy these games on Linux as well if you don't want to be a streamer and wish to run things on your own hardware. I really think the streaming era is going to be very good for the PC gamers out there, because this is all commodity hardware, and whether you run it locally or stream it, I'm sure developers will want to get that game available to you the way you want to play it, and it doesn't cost them anything really to go from Stadia back to a direct PC sale, in that they're developing for a common open source platform here. So this is good news for gamers all around, and I do think it is going to have a little more legs than people think. And I think it will actually strengthen the PC gaming market in the process, but it might weaken the traditional gaming console. So I think Sony may have some trouble with this. Microsoft is exploring some of this streaming now, and I think they may accelerate those efforts, seeing where things are playing out. And for Microsoft, they benefit from streaming because they sell Windows software that runs on PCs. And again, I think this will strengthen the PC side of the gaming market. Nintendo's in a good position just because they have something portable that's really fun to play with. So I don't think the Switch is going to get hit all that hard with this. And you could probably see there being a client for the Switch to play Stadia games, and I'm sure Microsoft games down the road too. So this is good news for everybody, I think. One thing though is your data cap, if you have one on your internet provider. When we were looking at the Google or the NVIDIA GeForce Now service a few months ago on the Android TV, we were talking about how quickly you could max out your 1 terabyte data cap from Comcast, for example. This surely will do that unless they work out some deal on that. And Variety's article here says Google Stadia is going to be a net neutrality nightmare. Because if you're streaming 4K 60 frames per second games, I can imagine that will be eating up your data plan very, very quickly. So it's a shame that Google has not been accelerating their fiber deployment, and this might lead to some additional net neutrality discussions down the road. Now, of course, Google doesn't always have the best track record when it comes to its new and exciting services. They often kill things off after they've tried them for a little while. Google Plus is a great example of that. And if you're curious as to all the different things that Google has killed off over the years, visit the Google Cemetery, where you can mourn Google Allo and Google Plus and Google Wave. Remember that? All sorts of stuff is dead and buried in the Google Cemetery, but it is remembered forever. And there's probably a good chance that Stadia may end up there as well. But we'll have to see what happens when they launch the service a little bit later this year.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters Chris Allegretta, the Four Guys with Quarters podcast, Tom Albrecht, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.